Will you stay if I undress? After the single dad saved her in the river. The river was angry that evening, swollen with rain and moving like it had something to prove, and by the time the sun bled into the clouds, it had already taken more than it planned to give back. The man running along the muddy bank did not think of courage or consequences or the cold that would bite into his bones. He only saw a shape struggling where no one should be, a life being pulled under by a force that never asked permission. He was a single father who had learned to count his days in small victories, but in that moment the world narrowed to breath and water and the choice to step forward when fear screamed to step away. He plunged in fully clothed, boots heavy, jacket dragging him down, hands scraping against slick stones, lungs burning as he fought the current that tried to turn him into one more story people would whisper about later. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet bravery of ordinary people, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Gentle Hearts. Your support helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. He reached her just as the river tried to fold her under, fingers closing around an arm that felt too light, too fragile for what it had been through. He kicked and pulled and lost his footing twice, swallowing water that tasted like iron and rain, until the bank rose up close enough to grab. They collapsed together in the mud, both coughing, both shaking, the sky dimming as if it were holding its breath too. Her clothes were soaked through, clinging, stealing heat from her body, and the realization struck him with a sharp fear that saving someone from drowning did not mean saving them from dying. Hypothermia crept fast and silent, and the wind had teeth. He did what he could with what he had, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders, pressing his hands together to rub warmth into fingers that barely responded. He thought of his daughter at home, waiting with homework spread across the kitchen table, the way she always did, believing her father would walk through the door because he always had. The weight of responsibility never left him, not since his wife's absence became a permanent shape in their lives, and now it pressed harder than ever as he weighed a terrible choice. To keep her alive, wet clothes had to go. There was no shame in survival, he reminded himself, only urgency. He turned his body to block the wind, eyes fixed on the ground, movements careful and respectful, as he freed her from the cold that was stealing her strength. The minutes stretched thin and brittle. He spoke to her not with words but with presence, steady hands and steady breath, counting heartbeats like a promise. The river kept roaring as if nothing important had happened, but slowly the trembling eased, and a fragile rhythm returned to her chest. When help finally arrived, lights cutting through dusk, he felt something loosen inside him that he did not know had been knotted so tight. He watched them take her away, soaked and exhausted, and then he stood alone by the water, shaking now that there was space to feel it. Life did not pause to honor what he had done. The next morning came with alarms and packed lunches and a daughter's sleepy smile by the door and a quiet ache in his muscles that felt earned. Yet something had shifted. He caught himself listening more closely to the world, noticing how often people walked past one another carrying storms no one could see. The river stayed with him, not as fear but as a reminder of how thin the line could be between loss and grace. Weeks passed before the change found a name. A letter arrived, careful handwriting on the envelope, gratitude folded into every line. She wrote about waking in a hospital with warmth finally winning, about learning how close she had come to vanishing, about the kindness of a stranger who did not ask for anything in return. She wrote about fear, about rebuilding trust in her own breath, about how survival had stripped her down to what mattered. He read the letter twice, then folded it and placed it somewhere safe, feeling humbled by praise he did not seek and responsibility he did not regret. Their lives began to brush against each other in small, ordinary ways. She volunteered at the community center near his apartment, drawn to places where people gathered to mend. He saw her once from across a room, standing steadier than before, eyes clearer, laughter cautious but real. He did not approach. He believed in letting things be. But time has a way of insisting. Paths crossed again at a river cleanup organized after the rains receded, hands reaching for the same bag of trash, shared purpose filling the space where words would have been. Trust did not rush them. It grew like warmth returning after cold, inch by inch. He learned about the weight she had carried long before the river, the losses that made her step too close to an edge, the shame she had been taught to wear even when it did not belong to her. She learned about the quiet resilience of single fatherhood, the nights he sat awake pretending not to worry, the joy he found in making pancakes on Sundays and fixing things that broke. They learned that saving someone once did not entitle you to their future, but showing up again and again might earn a place in it. Challenges rose as they always do. Old fears resurfaced. Rumors whispered. The world tested whether one brave moment could hold against many difficult days. He worried about protecting his daughter from complications she did not ask for. She worried about being seen only as the woman from the river, defined by a moment of vulnerability. Together, without speeches or promises, they chose patience. They chose kindness that did not demand repayment. They chose to keep going when it would have been easier to step back. The river changed with the seasons, calmer now, reflective, carrying leaves instead of fury. On an autumn afternoon, they stood at a distance from the bank, watching sunlight scatter across the surface. He felt gratitude that surprised him with its depth, not because he had been a hero, but because he had been allowed to be human at the exact moment it mattered. She felt something like peace, knowing that survival did not require erasing who she had been, only honoring who she was becoming. Near the end of winter, as life settled into a new rhythm that felt earned rather than borrowed, she wrote another note, not to thank him for saving her life, but to thank him for staying present without trying to own the story. He kept that one too. He understood then that love often begins where respect refuses to leave, and that sometimes the bravest question is not whether someone will stay after you are stripped of protection, but whether you can stay true to yourself while offering warmth to another. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of quiet courage and the healing that comes from simple human decency, please like, comment, and share this video, and subscribe to Gentle Hearts so more stories of hope can find their way to those who need them. Before we end, leave a comment below and tell us one thing this story made you feel, or a moment when kindness changed your life. Your words might be the warmth someone else is searching for.